Is there really a gene that can make you a serial killer? Well, no, there is no serial killer gene. If that were the case, then scientists could study serial killers from the day that they are born and then monitor them throughout their entire life. While there is no specific gene for serial killers, there is a gene that can influence someone's aggression and emotional control. This gene is called the MAOA gene, or the warrior gene. So what is this warrior gene, you might ask? I am so glad because I'm going to tell you. Okay, well, for starters, the MAOA stands for the enzyme called monoamine oxidase A. This enzyme is responsible for breaking down neurotransmitters like epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, the ones that regulate your moods and emotions. And what's interesting about this gene is that it originates from the X chromosome. So you would think that females are more subject to having this mutation, but you would be wrong, because according to Jillian Highsmith et al., low levels of this gene are found for the most part in males. Matter of fact, another study I would like to mention that confirmed that males are more subject to having this mutation is a study that was conducted by Bird and Maoa that studied both male and female cohorts with low levels of the MAOA enzyme and an exposure to childhood maltreatment. They found that childhood maltreatment predicted antisocial behavior in male subjects more so than female subjects. Okay, so mutations within this gene affect the levels of the neurotransmitters, which can increase the aggressive behaviors in an individual. An increase of aggressive behaviors makes it challenging for those with this mutation to control their impulses, thus why it is called the warrior gene. A study conducted by McDermott and colleagues in 2008 showed that low levels of monoamine oxidase A enzymes lead to a higher rate of aggression. This study actually compared two groups of male subjects. One group had low levels of MAOA enzymes and the other had a high level of MAOA enzyme, in which they concluded that the group with the low levels of MAOA showed far more signs of aggression. So keeping the findings from that study in the back of our noggin, variations in the MAOA gene can moderate the impact of traumatic events that occur early in one's life. These events might predispose a person to engage in violence as an adult. The British Journal of Psychiatry actually states that exposure to violence was associated with more symptoms of conduct disorder in adolescence and antisocial personality in adulthood, and a higher probability of arrest and partner violence. So basically what that is saying is that children that suffer abuse and have low levels of MAOA are more likely to develop antisocial behaviors as an adult, which antisocial problems often relate to aggression and impulses of emotions. Antisocial behavior does vary in between individuals, and it can be associated with the development of different issues in one's life. Actually, Viding and colleagues state that antisocial behavior, including aggression and rule breaking that begins in childhood, is associated with the development of a range of mental health problems, physical health problems, special educational needs, failure to complete education, and legal system involvement. So once again, low activity levels of the MAOA gene are linked to higher levels of aggression, especially if an individual is exposed to violence or maltreatment in their childhood. A well-known serial killer that actually had this gene mutation and was exposed to trauma as a child is Ted Bundy. If you don't know, Ted Bundy did actually have a very traumatic childhood. He was raised by his stepfather and was raised thinking that his mom was his sister, so he did go through a lot of traumatic events as a child, and as we have learned, that on top of having low levels of MAOA leads to aggressive behavior, and Ted Bundy is one of the most well-known serial killers of our time. So to basically sum up everything that we just went over in this video, there is not a serial killer gene. There is a gene that affects our regulations of emotions that is called monoamine oxidase A gene, or the MAOA gene. Lower levels of MAOA in individuals, specifically male individuals, who are exposed to violence during their childhood can lead to an increase of aggressive behavior. This increase in aggressive behavior leads to the engagement of criminal activity such as becoming a serial killer. Now, that's not to say that if an individual has low levels of this enzyme and they have exposure to violence or maltreatment as a child, that they are going to become a serial killer. It varies in between individuals. So that basically concludes and covers everything with the MAOA gene. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new.